The aged care sector set for its biggest overhaul in 30 years. Joyce, the former boss of Qantas, took home $3.4 million last financial year for 2 months' work, and the collapsed airline Rex, accused of stealing 4 planes. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Friday, the 13th of September 2024. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, the main story this morning, Federal Labor and the Coalition have struck a deal on aged care funding in which many self-funded retirees and part pensioners will pay more for their care.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called the Aged Care Act the greatest improvement to the sector in 30 years. It includes an extra $4.3 billion for supported home, which is forecast to reduce wait times for in-home care quite significantly. There's also new laws to protect older Australians at home, but wealthier older Australians will have to pay more. And the deal will save the budget $12.6 billion over 10 years. Both sides of politics have been in negotiations over the past 6 months or so. Yesterday, the opposition leader Peter Dutton said he wanted people to have dignity as they age. Aged care costs the government about $36 billion a year, a top 5 spend in the federal budget. Notwithstanding yesterday's announcement, that impost is expected to keep rising. However, aged care spending as a percentage of GDP, which is actually a better measure, will reduce. Under the deal, people already in aged care homes or on the waiting list for home care will be exempt.
That is a big story in itself, but there's a fair bit of other stuff going on as well in Canberra at the moment.
Very, very busy at federal parliament. Yesterday, Defence Minister Richard Marles said he'd stripped Distinguished Service medals from several current and former Army commanders for failing to prevent war crimes by Australian Special Forces soldiers in Afghanistan, though he didn't identify who those were that were losing their awards. The decision finalises the government's response to the Brereton War Crimes Inquiry, which found credible information that 25 Special Air Service soldiers unlawfully killed 39 Afghan civilians and prisoners. Also, Teal MP Kylie Tink's seat of North Sydney will be abolished before next year's federal election. After the final decision in controversial changes to election boundaries were confirmed yesterday, the Australian Electoral Commission said a review had unanimously accepted the proposed boundaries released in May. Now, North Sydney will be abolished, and the division of Cook in Sydney's Sutherland Shire will be altered to recognise early Prime Minister Joseph Cook and explorer Captain James Cook. Also, Labor has scrubbed criminal penalties for seriously vilifying minority groups from its upcoming hate crimes bill, and Labor will expand its plans to crack down on lies on social media by adding political content into misinformation laws before the federal election. That'll pretty much set up a dispute in Parliament about whether the revised plan will curb free speech. As you said, and I agreed, plenty going on in Canberra.
Yeah, sure was. How about local markets? What happened yesterday?
Plenty going on, Michael. The S&P ASX 200 closed up more than 1% yesterday to 8,076 points, the best session in about 3 weeks. In fact, the index is now just 72 points off the all-time high that was set in August. It's 8,148.7 points. Not far off that. A rally in US stocks helped things along while the miners set the pace locally, with uranium and lithium players among the best. Rising Brent prices helped the oil and gas companies, while tech leader WiseTech Global hit a record high. It jumped almost 4% yesterday. The banks were higher. Westpac, ANZ and CBA were all up more than 1%. Goodman Group jumped more than 2%. The retails and Telstra were among the underperformers. Plenty of corporate news around, really. Media reports suggest that Star Entertainment's lenders have offered to give the gaming group an extra $150 million to help it survive a cash crunch caused by cost blowouts at its new Brisbane casino and a slowdown in patrons visiting its gaming floors. Its shares were suspended yesterday. Health insurer NIB rose after Chief Executive Mark Fitzgibbon announced he'd stepped down in November after more than 2 decades leading the company. Brickworks will take a $124 million expense this fiscal year due to a severe deterioration in building activity in Sydney and Brisbane, higher operating costs and a slowdown in the US market. And finally, Woodside Energy has been forced to temporarily cease production at its Shenzi oil and gas field in the US Gulf of Mexico. That's because Hurricane Francine is tracking through the area.
Do you know why it's called Brent crude, Sean?
Well, Brett was too common? No.
I find this absolutely fascinating, right?
Do you know the answer?
I do. I do know the answer.
Oh, yes. Tell me.
Apparently, it came from because that oil was initially produced from the Brent oil field, and the Brent oil field got its name because the Shell company originally named all of its oil fields after birds. In this case, the Brent goose.
Really?
Yes.
That is a cracking piece of trivia.
Yeah. And look, I'd like to thank my friends at Wikipedia for
ever reliable.
Yeah. I'm sure it's 100% true. I mean, isn't that fascinating?
So can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
So what sort of oil is Brent oil compared to some other sort of oil?
Well, it's typically oil made from geese, I'm assuming.
Moving on.
And you can actually pinpoint the moment at which my knowledge ran out just then.
Well, I mean, there's West Texas Intermediate, right? So that's kind of different to Brent. But I'm just wondering whether there's only two types of oil or whether out there in the world there's hundreds of different types of oil.
Oh, you know what? This has all the makings of an ask, fear and greed, but it might be a question that we ask ourselves.
Yeah, someone better ask us first, then we'll go and do the research.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a hard one.
Yeah, indeed. If you have a question for Ask Fear and Greed, send it on through and we will get onto it. Please ask us about Brent crude and what was it, West Texas Intermediary?
Yeah, West Texas Intermediate, WTI.
Ah, okay. Say WTI. I. Okay, not F. Gotcha. Immediately after the show, terrible segue here. You got a great interview coming up with Stefan von Imhoff, who is the co-founder of alternative investing community fund alts.co. This is fascinating.
It sure is. We always talk to Stefan about ways to invest in things that you've never thought about. And this time around, it's film financing. And there's two types of investing in film financing, the big hits and then the indie productions. Often the indie productions are crowdsourcing. Stefan's alts.co invests in big hits, but it's not directly. It's actually in something, it's sort of a bridging finance product that they've got. And it is a fascinating look at what to think about when investing in films and, the risks, the rewards. As always with Stefan, we end up having a really interesting conversation about stuff I know nothing about.
Yeah, and particularly when he's talking about which genre of film actually delivers the best returns, which I won't spoil because it's worth going and having a listen. The interview's coming up after the show. Now, thanks to Blue Chip Communication, the experts helping financial services companies market, communicate and grow. Visit bluechipcommunication.com.au. What's going on in international markets?
Chipmaker Nvidia's share price jumped 8% yesterday morning after CEO Jensen Huang said the company is struggling to meet demand expectations, as in everyone wants their product. He said customers had no choice but to embrace accelerated computing. As a result, they need NVIDIA's chips. Staying in that artificial intelligence space, OpenAI is in talks to raise $6.5 billion according to Bloomberg. What's interesting about this, it puts a value on the company and it values the company at about $150 billion. Basically, it's become the world's most valuable startup company. Now, it is 9 years old, it was founded in 2015. It's pretty much been at the center of the technology industry's rapid shift towards AI, kicking off a massive investing frenzy in 2022 with the debut of ChatGPT. All this positive news helped the tech-heavy Nasdaq close up 2.2% yesterday morning. The broader-based S&P 500 was up more than 1%. Otherwise, Brent crude,
the oil made from geese.
That's it. Up a touch, trading around $71 a barrel. Gold, $25.17 an ounce, and the Aussie dollar is buying just a touch under 67 US cents.
All right, we'll take a quick break, restore some credibility, and be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, former Qantas boss Alan Joyce took home $3.4 million last financial year, even though he only worked for the national carrier for 2 months, while current CEO Vanessa Hudson had her pay packet cut to $4.4 million.
Yeah, so the airline's annual report published yesterday shows that the board has decided Ms. Hudson had exceeded expectations, is the phrase used, and her pay includes a base of $1.4 billion, short-term bonuses of over $1 million, add in long-term incentive plans, a few other benefits, comes out about $4.4 million, though that is down from the nearly $6 million the previous financial year. Mr. Joyce's pay would have been much more, but the board had already decided he wouldn't receive a $9.2 million bonus after a review of the company's governance. His $3.4 million last year included $381,000 in base pay, so he's earning about $200,000 a month, another $3.15 million in long-term bonuses. He would have accrued that over his time. Qantas's remuneration report suffered one of the biggest ever votes against it at last year's AGM. Yesterday in the annual report, the national carrier said it will change how it assesses the performance of executives from next year. I'm sure it's going to come under a bit of pressure on this one. Again,
yes, I suspect you might be right on that one, Sean. Now, the boss of Nine Entertainment, Mike Sneesby, will leave the job at the end of the month, with the search now on for a new CEO for the country's largest listed media company.
It was a bit of a surprise announcement and comes after a tough period for Nine, including both falling profits and share price. Sneesby, the architect of Nine's Stan streaming service, was promoted to the top job 3.5 years ago. Since then, the company's share price has fallen by more than 50%. More recently, Sneesby's been criticised for payouts to senior management, embroiled in allegations of predatory behaviour. That forced him to launch an investigation into the group's workplace culture. Now, media is reporting that shareholders aren't happy with the pace of change at Nine, which of course owns television stations, free-to-air as well as Stan, radio stations, including 3AW and 2GB, streaming services and publishing assets, the big ones being The Age, the Sydney Morning Herald and the Australian Financial Review. In a statement, Mr. Sneesby said he made the personal decision to consider new opportunities, and the company's Chief Financial and Strategy Officer, Matt Stanton, has been named interim CEO. Catherine West, Nine's chair, said Mr. Sneesby had successfully guided the company through the COVID-19 pandemic, secured the rights to the Olympic Games, and overseen strategic and cultural change. Nine's share price fell 4% yesterday, not helped by the fact it was trading ex-dividend.
Now, how about this one? I mentioned this at the top of the show, Sean. Regional Express, the collapsed airline, allegedly stole 4 planes from an aircraft graveyard in the Arizona desert, stripped them for parts and sold the rest. This is a claim from an American aircraft leasing and maintenance company.
It is a cracking story, and there are only allegations, but it's just too good an allegation not to look into. The lawsuit, filed by Jet Midwest in the Supreme Court of New South Wales, comes as Rex is in administration. Rex ended that way after lenders grew anxious about its ability to repay debts, and of course the company's plan to compete with Qantas and Virgin Australia on busy routes between Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane faltered. Now, according to a report in the Fin Review, Jet Midwest alleges that Rex took possession of 4 Saab twin-engine turboprops at Kingman Airport, a former military base in Arizona, shipped engines, propellers and other valuable parts to Australia. It claims that Rex asked that the wings be cut off from the airline and sold. The profits from the sale of these parts also went to Rex, at least in part. According to court filings, Jet Midwest had agreed to sell Rex the aircraft in 2019 for $2 million US. The airline paid $200,000 US, that's a 10% deposit, but never paid the rest. It requested more time, citing a loss of earnings during the COVID-19 pandemic. When no payment was made by June 2020, Jet Midwest alleges the sale contract was void, i.e., Rex had stolen the planes. The administrators of Rex weren't commenting yesterday. It's still got to go through the court system, of course.
Now, lithium and nickel miner IGO has promised to continue to focus on battery minerals, even though prices have fallen sharply, and it wants to add copper to its list of products.
IGO's share price jumped 7% yesterday after Chief Executive Ivan Vella outlined the group's strategy to investors. He expects extreme volatility in lithium prices for the next decade. He also said that IGO would have a lesser focus on nickel. That commodity has experienced huge supply growth out of Indonesia, sending its price tumbling. Mr. Vella wants to build a copper division. Now, copper is a mature industry, and he says it will provide IGO with a stable complement to the volatility of the lithium sector. Lithium prices are actually less than 10% what they were at the beginning of the year, so it's certainly been a very volatile commodity.
Turning to international news. Now, Vladimir Putin says Moscow should consider limiting exports of uranium, titanium and nickel in retaliation for Western sanctions, sending shares of the commodities soaring.
Yeah, that's what helped some of the Australian uranium makers yesterday. The remarks prompted a rise in nickel prices, drove shares in uranium mining companies globally. Mr. Putin said such restrictions could also be introduced for other commodities, noting that Russia is a major producer of natural gas, diamonds and gold. But he added, but the measures do not need to be taken immediately and must not cause damage to Russia itself. While Western countries have cut purchases of Russia's oil and gas since the start of the war in Ukraine, Russia remains a major exporter of metals to world markets.
Donald Trump has suggested that he would not debate Kamala Harris again unless it was on his own terms after he lost Wednesday's debate on a points decision.
Yeah, so Mr. Trump criticised the ABC News network that hosted the debate, insisted he had won, even though most commentators, including conservatives, disagree. Mr. Trump also said that Ms. Harris's request for another debate proved she'd lost, because only the loser asks for a rematch. Snap polls suggest Ms. Harris had won the debate by a wide margin. Reuters is reporting that Mr. Trump's donors and advisors believe he lost the debate, while shares in his media company fell more than 13%. The share price of Trump Media and Technology Group tends to oscillate with Mr. Trump's prospects of returning to office.
And Taylor Swift, fresh from endorsing Kamala Harris, has really then gone back to doing what she does best, winning awards for her music.
Yeah, maybe she sings better than she wins awards, but she's pretty good at both of them. She took home 7 gongs at the 2024 MTV Video Music Awards, taking her career total to 30, equaling Beyonce as the most awarded musician in the Video Music Awards history. The Cruel Summer singer picked up the prizes for Video of the Year for Fortnite, that featured Post Malone, Artist of the Year and Best Collaboration among her record-equaling haul at the 40th edition of the annual event. Swift also encouraged her fans who are over 18 to register to vote in the upcoming US election, though she avoided directly mentioning her endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris.
All right, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview. Your guest today is Stefan von Imhoff, who is the co-founder of alternative investing community fund Alts.co.
All about investing in films. So big budget films, independent films. I didn't even realize that you could do it. Well, you can. Stefan tells us all about it.
Yeah, it is a cracking chat. It is up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thanks very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Friday, the 13th of September 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.